What's up, people? So glad you're here tonight at late night. We got midterms this week. I know it's busy for y'all, and I'm excited that you guys are here tonight. I know what this room is filled with, man. Influencers, leaders. Hey, if this is your first late night ever, here's what to expect from late night. Basically, we have a 20, 25-minute talk on leadership. We have some Chick-fil-A. We got some great people in this room. So if you're new here tonight, all you need to do is sit back, relax, enjoy the talk, learn something, meet some great people here, and come back next week. We're excited you're here. Guys, I'm the campus director of Arizona StuMo. So we started StuMo about 8 years ago here at Arizona. And just to see this room grow into what it is right now, it's so special for me, and it's exciting for me always to be speaking to you guys in this room. So a little bit about myself. I'm a little bit of a hypochondriac. So anybody there with me? Like anybody? Okay, just me. Okay, that's good. That's good. Here's what a hypochondriac is. Okay, a hypochondriac, I'll just read the definition for you guys. A hypochondriac is someone who lives with the fear that they have a serious but undiagnosed medical condition, even though diagnostic tests show there is nothing wrong with them. So that's me. Now, I'm not like, over the top hypochondriac, like always thinking I'm going to die, but sometimes it gets the better of me, like the last week, like if I'm feeling bad, man, I kind of go to the nth degree of like, man, I'm going to die. Like, I'm going to die. And my wife's like, hey, I think you just need some sleep. You'll be fine. I'm like, that's actually a good idea. That's probably what it is. And so sometimes it's gotten the better of me, especially in college. I remember it was my sophomore year, and I was just moving into my fraternity. And I lived in my fraternity for 3 years, loved every minute of it. And moving in, and I'm moving on to Main Hall. And Main Hall is like the place where everything happens. And in our house, what you got to know about it is it was built in the 1950s. So there was some stuff that they used to build a house, definitely not legal today. And so we had these rooms, and since it was so old, we could kind of do whatever we wanted to the rooms. So you could knock down walls, you could like hang stuff from the ceilings, you could like create tunnels to other rooms, like you could do whatever you wanted in the house. It was actually kind of amazing. And so I show up at the house, move into my room. It's one of the bigger rooms on Main Hall, and we're deciding, okay, let's bring this room to the next level. We need some more storage. We're going to install shelves. Okay, so we're not handymen, me and my roommate Steven, but we decided, okay, we're going to get this project done. It'll probably take us like an hour or so, but we'll figure it out. And so what we do is we get our drill, and we're like, okay, it's going to be an hour. And 6 hours later, we end up finishing drilling these shelves into the walls. And the whole time, when we're drilling into the walls of this house built in the 1950s, we're just breathing in all this crazy toxic stuff, like nonstop, getting all this dust throughout the room, super unhealthy. And so we finish, and it's like a Thursday night. There's a party going on at the house, and we're like, man, we got to clean up this room. It's a mess. Like, look at this room. Like, we got to fix it. And so Steven's like, hey, go get the vacuum. We'll clean it up, and then we'll be done for the day. And so I run downstairs to get the vacuum for the fraternity. We had 200 guys in our fraternity. We had one vacuum, which is a problem. I run downstairs. I go to the closet. I'm about to pick up the vacuum, and I'm like, man, my vision is super blurry. And so it's just me downstairs. Everyone else is upstairs in the house. I'm just sitting there. And probably for about 10 minutes, my hypochondriac just kicks in. And I'm just sitting there, like, doing the vision test, like, over and over again. Like, what is going on? I'm like, why am I losing my vision? And then I remembered that I had read an article earlier that week that, man, if you have blurry vision, you're having a stroke. And that's where I went in my head. I go, oh, my gosh. I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm having a stroke right now. And so I did what any of you guys would do. I picked up the vacuum in one arm. I run up the stairs, like pledges are just joining the house. I'm like pushing pledges over. I'm like, move over, pledge. I'm having a stroke. He's like, what's going on? And I run to the room, and I see my roommate, Steven, and I look at him like, Steven, I need you to take me to the hospital right now. I'm having a stroke. And Steven looks at me. He's like, okay, like we can go to the hospital, that's fine. I'm like, let's go right now. We need to go. And so he comes out of the room, and like the Main Hall's packed, and I'm like kind of pushing him down the hall, like, man, we got to get out of here. People are like, what's their problem? I'm like, I'm having a stroke. I got to get out of here. I push him down the hall. We get to his car. He starts driving me to the hospital. And so, Steven's kind of like a conscientious, responsible dude, like really nice dude. And he looks at me and he goes, man, hey, I got to ask you a question. Do you think you're overreacting a little bit? And I look at him and I go, man, no, I'm definitely having a stroke. And he keeps driving a couple miles down the road. He's like, Jake, he just starts asking me some questions, talk to me. My vision starts coming back. I start feeling normal. My heart rate starts going down. He goes, man, just want to ask again. Like, it feels like you might be overreacting. I go, yeah, I think I was. He goes, you want to go to McDonald's instead? And that's what we did. We went to McDonald's, man. My hypochondriac came out. And in that moment, man, I felt so much anxiety. You know, that's kind of followed me throughout life, anxiety through those types of events in my life. And here's what I know about everybody in this room, especially in midterm week at Arizona. All of you guys have experienced anxiety. So I was researching about anxiety this week, like learning about it, trying to figure out what the deal is with anxiety these days. And this is what they say about anxiety these days with Gen Z. 91% of Gen Z people have experienced anxiety, and not just anxiety, but serious anxiety. And I started looking at that, and my main question was, who are the 9% of people who have not experienced anxiety? Like, can we even trust those people? Like, I've never met those people before. But 91% of people are experiencing serious anxiety. And here's the thing about Arizona. Man, Arizona, it's an awesome school. It's a great school. You guys picked the right school to go to. But man, sometimes it can heap fuel on the flame of anxiety. You guys know what I'm talking about. Man, it's a work hard, play hard school. So man, not only are you guys grinding academically, man, you guys are having a great social life as well, which I love. Academics, you know, really high academic standards here. So if you're in Eller or if you're in engineering or something like that, man, you're feeling the pressure of that, and it causes anxiety. I think on top of that, you know, Arizona pushes you guys to really succeed in your career, man. Get the best career, the best internship, do Wall Street Scholars, do whatever it takes to have the best job possible. Anxiety. And even though we're more connected than ever with our social media, technology, everything like that, man, sometimes we can look around. Even though we're connected to more people than ever before, we can feel more isolated than we've ever felt. Now, here's the problem with anxiety. Man, anxiety has multiple negative effects in our life. I was just researching to see, man, how deep do the effects of anxiety go in people's lives? And what's really interesting about anxiety is it actually goes down all the way to your DNA. Man, if you're anxious, if you're chronically anxious, it actually goes to your DNA and affects how your DNA replicates. It kills relationships, anxiety does. When people feel severe anxiety, what it does is people tend to have two responses to anxiety, either to attack or to isolate when they're feeling anxiety. It can kill our relationships. It forces us to numb out. I mean, we've all been through a tough week, like a week like this where we're grinding all week, getting everything done. We get to the end of a long week, we're exhausted, we need sleep, and what we do at the end of the long week is we come back and we watch 5 hours of some series we weren't even interested in, and we numb out. And I think the number one problem with anxiety is that it causes us to miss out on God's purpose for our life. I think that's the biggest problem with anxiety, is I've met with thousands of students here at Arizona over the years of being here. What I've seen, what I think the number one issue that causes people to miss out on God's purpose for life more than anything else, it's anxiety. So we started a new series. It's called G.O.A.T. And what we want to do in this series is we want to take you guys right to the words of Jesus. And we want to see if he has solutions for some of the biggest problems that we face in society today. And so today, what we're looking at what Jesus has to say about anxiety, what he has to say about worry. Does he have anything to say to us that can actually help us in this area? I think he does. You see, the crazy thing about Jesus is that he cares deeply about the people that follow him. And so we're going back and we're looking at a teaching that Jesus gave about anxiety. And man, it's ground changing. It changes the whole nature of anxiety if you can understand what Jesus is saying about it here. Now, the temptation when we go back to Jesus' teachings is to say, okay, it's 2,000 years ago. Man, these people, they don't have the same problems I have now. Obviously, they had different situations. They weren't as anxious as we are today, but I'm here today to tell you guys they had serious problems. They have serious anxiety. And Jesus is teaching this group of people, this large group of people, and it's in this teaching that he gives them the secret to dealing with anxiety. Man, actually curing the anxiety in their life. Can you imagine a life where you're not anxious? Sometimes for me, that's hard. Like thinking about my life and how anxious I can be at different times, man, it's hard for me to imagine a life where I don't have anxiety. But Jesus gives us the keys to deal with anxiety. And this is where he starts, right here. This is what he says. He says, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? You see, what Jesus is doing right here is he's getting right to the heart of the matter, and he's saying, hey, do not be anxious about anything. And that's a tough teaching, man. He's coming to people and saying, hey, don't be anxious. That seems impossible. That seems like a hard thing to actually follow through on. He gives us the reason why we shouldn't be anxious, and what he says is, isn't your life more than clothes? Isn't it more than food? You see, if we're going to escape anxiety in our life, what we got to understand is that life is bigger than stuff. It's bigger than money. It's bigger than clothes. It's bigger than success. It's bigger than our job. Man, if we're going to escape anxiety, we got to understand that, man, life is so much bigger than that. Man, people who escape anxiety in their life, they start to understand that, man, our priorities and the things we build our life on, they're so much bigger than the things of this world. I was talking to one of my friends last week, and he's a stud. He's a sophomore here, and he's slated to be the president of the fraternity he's in over the next year. And he's good for it, man. He's a great leader. He's sharp. And so I was coaching him on leadership, and I was like, he was walking me through like his 10-year plan for the next 10 years of his life. I was like, okay, man, what are your priorities for the next 10 years? And so he walks me through his priorities. And as he was walking me through his priorities, I was like, hey, man, let's do a little exercise here, and let's go all the way to the end of your life. Man, what are your priorities at the end of your life? Do they match up with your priorities now? And the crazy thing was, they didn't. You see, he was gearing up, to live a life aiming at these priorities that at the end of his life, they were things that he probably wouldn't even care about. People who escape anxiety, the first thing they do is they have right priorities, and they understand that life is bigger than the things of this world. And Jesus continues on. And this is what he says. He says, look at the birds of the air. They neither sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? So Jesus is teaching this group of people outside, and you can kind of imagine it's a big group of people kind of like this, and there's wildlife around. There's a bird that flies over, and he points at the bird. He's like, hey, does that bird have to worry about the food that it's gathering? Does it have to worry about finding shelter? Does it have to do any of those things? It's like, no, God provides for that bird. And the point that Jesus is making is that you are more valuable than that. You're so much more valuable than that. See, I don't know, like the homes you guys grew up in, I don't know if your parents always showed you that you have that kind of value in your life. But man, here's what God thinks about you. And it's really important if you're going to deal with the anxiety in your life. God thinks you're his child. He thinks you're his child. And when you're God's child, he values you so much. You see, I'm starting to understand this. My oldest son, Conrad, he just turned 8 two days ago. And so we're celebrating Conrad's birthday. He's the man. He's a kind, conscientious stud. I love Conrad. But here's the thing about Conrad. He went into first grade last year, and for the first time ever, he was getting bullied. And so he walks into first grade. Kids are making fun of him. And so I'm trying to sort through, like, why is he getting bullied, all these different things. So I go to his teachers, and I talk to him, and they tell me basically it centers around this game called Gaga Ball. And so anyone know Gaga Ball in here? Someone's played Gaga Ball before? Okay. So basically, if you don't know what Gaga Ball is, it's like dodgeball, but they put you in like this 10-foot octagon, like training for UFC or something like that. And these like kids, like 30 first graders, get in this little octagon. And dude, it's crazy. They're just smoking each other with the ball. And so Conrad starts playing this game, and these kids are just mouthing off at him, right? They're taking him down. And so what we did is we went and we talked to his teachers. We're like, hey, what's the problem here? We start dealing through the issues that he's dealing with. They start taking care of it. But man, one day I said, Conrad, I'm coming to play Gaga Ball. He's like, you're coming? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to play Gaga Ball. And so one day, sure enough, I show up at lunch. The kids are playing Gaga Ball. They're first graders. I'm like, hey guys, can I play? So I step into the Gaga Ball ring, and there's the two kids that are bullying Conrad. And what I did in that game is I showed them mercy, right? I played the game. I wasn't hard on. No, guys, I got in that Gaga Ball pit, and I smoked those kids. I smoked them, right? I got in that Gaga Ball pit, and man, I showed them, hey, dude, if you mess with Conrad, you mess with me. Here's the truth about God. He feels that way about you. You're his child. He knows you. He knows what you need, and he values you. And if you're going to escape anxiety in your life, you got to understand that God values you. He really does. He cares deeply for you. You're his child. Well, Jesus continues on, and this is what he says. He says, and which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And what he does in this is he starts to attack the very idea of being anxious and worrying. You guys have all experienced anxiety before, but the question I have for you guys, how much has anxiety or worry actually added to your life? Like if you think about how much you've been anxious or worried about different things, man, think about how much, has it added any value to your life? You know, like there's good situations to be anxious in, okay? Dave Edwards, last week, he talked about the spider thing. Like he saw a huge spider. If you guys were here for SMC night last week, man, crazy. I have a huge fear of spiders as well, okay? So I have my own spider story from last week. I had a friend who was staying in our guest house behind our house, and we just worked out, and he went in to go take a shower in the house. And man, he runs out of the guest house in his underwear. He's like, Jake, there's a huge spider in the bathroom. I'm like, dude, go put some clothes on. What are you doing? And so I walk into the bathroom, and man, I see this spider. It's the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life, wolf spider. And man, I panic. He's like, you got to kill it, right? You got to do that. And, you know, in front of my friend, I got to be brave. Like, I got to actually, like, do something about this spider. So I'm like, yeah, I got it, but I'm terrified. Man, in those situations, man, where your life's on the line, which maybe that's not it with this spider, it's good to be anxious. But think about the other times you're anxious. Most of the times you're anxious. Does it add anything to your life? My guess would be no. And that's the point Jesus wants to make. So he continues on, and this is what he says. And he says, and why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? So he doubles down. He says, guys, if you're going to escape the anxiety of your life, you have to understand that you are so valuable to God. But then he does something really unique. And he kind of reframes the whole idea of anxiety, and he actually makes it a faith issue. And basically what he's doing is he's saying anxiety is not necessarily like deals with the things that you control in your life or your circumstances. It's really a belief issue. It's really an issue of what do you really believe is true in your life. And you're like, what does that even mean? Well, he clarifies it right here, and this is what he says. He says, therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them all. Most people spend their life pursuing things, stuff, materials, success, achievements. You know, there's a famous billionaire. He was like one of the first billionaires in American history. His name was Rockefeller. Maybe you guys have heard of Rockefeller before, but there's a famous story about him where someone came up to him and they said, hey, how much more money would be enough for you? And at this point, he's a billionaire, which in today's dollars is billions and billions and billions. And he looks at whoever asked him this question and he says, just $1 more. He spent his whole life chasing things, chasing success. There's a different path. And when Jesus says anxiety is a faith issue, basically what he's saying is that your heavenly Father knows that you need all of these things. And he's saying, if you're going to avoid anxiety in life, you have to believe two things. There's two things that you have to believe if you're going to get free of the anxiety in your life. And the first thing is that God exists. He exists. There's a God of the universe who created the universe. He created you. He gave you a specific purpose. He upholds the world. He makes sure everything works. There's actually a God in the universe who exists. And the second thing you have to believe if you're going to escape anxiety is that that God knows what you need. And he cares about it. He cares about you. It's tough sometimes, man. We live in a world where we're believing the idea that God exists, man. It's a tough thing to believe. Most people actually believe that God exists. Like if you went up to most people on this university campus and asked them, hey, do you believe that God exists? They would say yes. But the crazy thing is, even though most people believe God exists, most of us actually live as if he doesn't. And we feel anxiety as we try to control our lives, as we have to deal with these hard things, thinking that we're alone. We can escape anxiety if we believe two things. God exists, and he knows what you need, and he cares about you. So I have a discussion question for you guys on this, and just be honest with the person next for you. Look at this right here. Is it harder for you at times to believe that God exists or that God knows what you need, and why? Go ahead and discuss with the people next to you. All right, hopefully you guys had some great discussion there on that question, man. It's something that, man, all of us struggle with one of those two things. And if we're going to deal with anxiety, we got to understand those things. So what's the cure for anxiety? Man, we talked about these principles, right? If we're going to be able to escape anxiety, there's certain things that we have to believe. And the first is that we have to believe that God or our life is bigger than things and success. Man, we actually have a purpose that's so much bigger than that. You have to believe that you're valuable to God. God actually cares about you and who you are. You have to believe that anxiety is a faith issue. It actually isn't about your circumstances, but it's about what you believe. And you have to believe that God exists and that he knows what you need and he cares about you. But what's the cure? What's the practical thing? What thing can we do when we're feeling anxiety that can help us escape those feelings of anxiety and actually move past it? Get rid of anxiety for good. Well, Jesus gives us the practical cure right here, and this is what it is. He says this, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. He gets practical. And this is what he says. He says, you kill anxiety by seeking God's kingdom first. You kill the anxiety in your life by seeking God's kingdom first in your life as your first priority. And guys, I want to flesh this out for us. I want to give us some practicals on this, but before we get there, man, I think something even better would be for you guys to hear from my friend Brielle on how she's dealt with this issue herself and hear her story. Give it up for Brielle.
Hi guys, I'm Brielle. For those of you I haven't met, I'm a junior in Delta Gamma, and I'm just really grateful to be able to share part of my story with you today. So basically, growing up, anxiety was something I always struggled with. Started in elementary school, I had my first panic attack ever, and it got worse through junior high and high school. In high school, I was on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, and I just thought anxiety was something that I could never get away from. Like they told me it was genetic, just something I would never get over, just something I had to deal with the rest of my life. And I felt really hopeless and isolated and just alone in it. Coming into college, going to U of A, anxiety obviously got a lot worse. And one thing I turned to a lot was substances. I would be so anxious and just wasn't really secure in who I was as a person. So, I'd start drinking and then I'd get drunk, and the next day I'd wake up and I'd be more anxious because I drank the night before. So I'd drink again, and it was just a constant anxiety cycle that I just felt like I couldn't escape. And about this point last year, I was at one of the worst places in my anxiety I'd ever been. There were days where I wouldn't leave my room, and I just didn't want to talk to anyone because I felt so anxious and just had no sense of security, and I just felt so lost. I was trying to control every single area of my life, and it just drained me so badly. And it wasn't until I went into SMC last year where I fully put my faith in Jesus and really gave up control of every area of my life. And I felt this overwhelming sense of peace, and I didn't know what it was. There's this verse, it's Philippians 4:6-7, says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, present your requests, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. I love this verse so much because it talks about the peace of God transcending all understanding. This peace that God has to offer us for our lives is so much greater just than anything we can comprehend. It's so much greater than anything this world has to offer, and I'm just so grateful that it's something I've been able to experience in my life. When you seek God and seek his kingdom first, he will bring you this peace. And I don't know what it is for you guys. Maybe it is anxiety. Maybe it's substances. Maybe it's something in your life just that has this like hold over you. But I promise you that if you give it to God and give him complete control, he will make your path straight and he will guide you. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you, Brielle. What a great story, and what a true testimony of what God can do in someone's life when they put his purposes first. Like I said, the practical tool, the way we get past anxiety is you kill anxiety by seeking God's kingdom first. And just to flesh it out for you guys, just even a little bit more on what that means, what that looks like in our life. Like, think about these different scenarios here. Okay, so this week we got midterms, right? Everyone's doing midterms. And you know what's crazy about people in school here at Arizona is that the people who stress the most about school are the people who study the most by far, right? The people who are in the library the most, the people who lock themselves in there, man, they're the people that stress about it the most. Change your mindset on school. And sometimes when we're feeling anxiety about school, what's happening is we're saying, hey, this is for me. Man, this area of my life, it's about me. It's about enabling me in my future. Man, what if you shifted your mindset instead to say, man, I'm in school, man, to honor God. I'm here to use the gifts and the talents he's given me to make an impact. And when you're studying for these tests, remember that, man, God puts you in that situation, man, so that you could honor him right there. It changes the whole game. Or what about your social life? There's a guy who I used to spend time with at Arizona. He has graduated a couple years ago, but he was a social chair in his fraternity. And I remember going up to him, and this was a couple years into us spending time together, and we were about halfway through his junior year. He was the social chair of his fraternity. I was like, hey, man, how's everything going? Like, are you enjoying life? You're social chair. Like, surely you're feeling like you're on top of the world. And he looked at me, and he goes, man, I hate my life. He's like, I hate it. I walk into every room, and man, I think that people hate me. I look around the room, and I think that, man, they don't like me. They don't want me there. And this was like one of the coolest guys I was spending time with. I'm like, man, that's crazy. But, you know, the interesting thing about his life is that when I started to think about it and how he was engaging his social life, how he was engaging going out and things like that, is every time he did, he was doing it for himself. And he was going to get things from people versus to make people's lives better, versus to serve God in that situation. And when he put all that pressure on himself and made it all about him, he was overwhelmed by anxiety. And what if in your social life instead, every time you stepped out, every time you went out, every time you went into a social situation, you thought, man, how can I make these people's lives better? How can I add value to them? Man, how can I help them grow? Doesn't that change it? Or think about job, career, money. Man, those are things that get thrown at you guys all the time here in Arizona. And here's the thing is people start to believe that these things are for them. They're for making their life better. They're for getting prosperity in their life. And what happens is when they don't get the right situation or they miss out on some opportunity, they feel anxiety as if they've missed it. But what if you looked at money and your job and your career and you thought, man, I'm going to use those things as a resource to honor God. I'm going to seek his kingdom first in this. And whatever I end up doing with my life, I'm going to do it to glorify God. You kill anxiety by seeking God's kingdom first. So if I asked you guys, who's the most influential athlete that's ever been endorsed by Nike, who would you guys say? Talking to you guys about this, I mean, like, surely you guys would come up with Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, LeBron. Like, you guys have all your answers. I see you guys shaking your heads out there. Actually, reading the founder of Nike's biography, I don't think he'd say any of those people. In fact, it wasn't them by a long shot. I think what Phil Knight would say, the most influential athlete we've ever endorsed is a guy named Steve Prefontaine. Check this out right here. This is Steve. Not exactly what you'd expect from an influential athlete, right? He's outside of his trailer. That's where he lived. He didn't have a ton of money, but Steve was a dog. He was a runner. And man, he was a beast. When Steve was at his height, Steve held the record from the 2,000 meter all the way to the 10,000 meters in America. He held all the U.S. records. And the thing that Steve was known for the most is that he was a front runner. And so if you're a runner, you know what I mean by this, but if you're not, basically what it means is he wasn't someone who was sitting back, letting someone else set the pace. Man, he always got out first in the race, and he was either going to die in first or get last. Like, that was his strategy. And I love this quote that he has right here. He said this: "The best pace is a suicide pace, and today looks like a good day to die." Intense guy, right? I mean, what a stud. But here's what we can learn about Steve and about how it deals with anxiety. Steve played offense, right? He didn't spend his life trying to play defense, trying to control things, trying to protect himself. Man, he played offense. He got after it. Man, he was setting a suicide pace. And man, he was trying to get the most out of his career as he possibly could. Jesus ends his lesson with this line. And this is what he said. He said, "Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." And what he's saying is, hey, being anxious, worrying about tomorrow and what's coming down the pipeline, it's a waste of time. He's like, today, right where you're at, right now, there's enough on your plate. We got to avoid anxiety. So here's the thing about Steve Prefontaine. At the peak of his career, he was just coming off the Olympic trials. He's about to go to the Olympics and just dominate. So he had the best Olympic trials of his life. He'd been in a couple at that point. People are projecting multiple golds. And as he finishes this trials, someone sets up a party for him, and he's driving to this party. And as he's driving to the party, he's hit by another car, and he's killed in his prime. A short life. Do you think if someone would have asked Steve right before he died if he regretted going all out in his gift, do you think he'd say yes to that? No. In fact, this is what he said. He said to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. What about you guys? In your walk with God, man, are you seeking his kingdom first? Are you playing offense? Are you getting after it? Or are you just trying to survive? Man, playing defense, doing the bare minimum. I want you guys to live lives free of anxiety, free of worry. Man, living lives where you're impacting people, man, changing people's lives. So many of you guys in this room are doing that. What I want to challenge you guys to do tonight is to kill the anxiety and the worry in your life by playing offense. Let's do that together. Thanks.